even United Airlines recognized that I require special handling. And I'm so fortunate and so very glad that I have my son here. I've been there through thick and thin, and the reason why I'm here is because of his persistence and his insistence that we get on, we figure out a way to come to San Francisco from Seattle, even though the first effort was unsuccessful. I would have just gone home, maybe. But Joaquin said, no, we got to figure out a solution. I was supposed to travel by train on Amtrak on the Coastal Starlight and train. And I think it's a misnomer because on a previous trip to Salinas, where I was honored for my voting rights work there, I didn't see the coast. And I didn't see any stars. So anyway, we were scheduled to go on the train, and we got there on time. As we drove into the station in Seattle, the parking lot that we normally would be using for long-term parking, they had closed it for Labor Day, and we were both stunned. The door was closed, and so we immediately called Anna at EJS and told her what our predicament was. And so as it turned out, I had a doctor's appointment, and he authorized me to travel by air because previously I had been prohibited from air travel, and I told the doctor, I have a constitutional right to interstate travel. Just ask Governor Huckabee, a noted constitutional scholar. And so he authorized my travel by plane, and we got here without incident, and so here I am. And I must warn you that I do have a very strong lisp, and sometimes my words are muffled. I used to say Joaquin is in the house, but people thought I said Joaquin is in the outhouse. So I didn't say that anymore. I used to say that I was a emeritus Joaquin voting rights attorney, and people thought I meant meritless. And so I stopped saying that. And I have tried, I didn't want to start out being a voting rights attorney. And the person who led me down that path was Sanford J. Rosen, an attorney here in San Francisco. And he was my litigation director when I first joined Molodent in San Francisco back in '74. And he called me into his office, and he said, Joaquin, you're a new attorney, we're going to give you all these cases. And one of them was a voting rights case. And I had such bad experience, at least seeing another co-law clerk in Alaska handle a voting rights case, that I never wanted to be near a voting rights case. And I told Sandy, I don't do voting rights cases. And those of you who know Sandy, he said, I'm not asking a question. So that started me off in my voting rights career. And intellectually, I knew that these cases made a big difference because they had a ripple effect. They started by, you get at the heart of the beast, and you make elected officials accountable. It has ripple effects. And then certainly in the city of Watsonville, those ripple effects are now felt. And in Texas, the same thing. And it wasn't a Dodge car, it was a Lancer. So anyway, that's how I started my voting rights career by default. And intellectually, when I started working at Malden, that's where I got my intellectual basis for these cases. But it wasn't until I went to West Texas that I got my passion, my heart, got into these cases, because I saw many community residents who back in the 30s and 40s, old people, who had been fighting just for the right to register, who had petitioned their school boards and city councils to change some discriminatory electoral feature. People who had gotten beat up, people who had gotten harassed, their children harassed, merely because they registered to vote and or ran as a candidate. And that's where I got my passion for these cases. And in Texas, I experienced just about everything. That's when I started getting my awards, and these awards have special meaning for me. And it seems like they come at me at a transformative period in my time. When I got my first award out of West Texas at Avila, I was very, very pleased by it. And I even got the key to a city. Yeah, I didn't know what that meant. It looked like a key. And didn't open any doors, actually. But it was a key anyway. And so as I got each award, the transformation occurred. And when I got my MacArthur so-called Genius Award, it was in my own mind, genius. I had to change my vocabulary. I couldn't say, how's it going? I had to say salutations, greetings, my good fellow. And then when I got my Mexican Oatly Award, hey, I'm going international. So these awards have very special meaning for me, and I do have, as I said, I do have a tendency to have muffled words. When I had my first heart attack, I told my wife that I'm having an angina attack, and I thought for a minute she thought I was saying vagina attack. I just saw that look in her eyes. Angina, heart attack. So fortunately, she took me to the hospital, and although she was very carefully looking at the room, where are you? So I went from there to doing cases in Salinas and elsewhere, and what I gathered was that the voting rights struggle is not a single event, it's a process. It started way back in the Constitutional Convention, back in the late 1700s, when in order to form this union, they wanted to keep the South within the United States, and the only way they could do that was by creating the 3/5 clause. And so they passed the 3/5 clause, and it wasn't until the Civil War, with the passage of the 14th Amendment, that we changed that. And well, I wasn't there personally, but it was changed. At least that's what people tell me. And so then the first Reconstruction started, and we had tremendous changes that were made affecting the right to vote. People of color started to get elected for the first time in the history, and unfortunately, it came to the progress and advancements came to a screeching halt with the Hayes-Tilton election in 1876, and then there was a sort of a hiatus up until the second Reconstruction, which was which happened after Brown versus Board of Education, where you had this massive, right after Brown, I mean, there was a lot of desegregation actions filed across the country. And for a period of time we had progress, but then the reactive forces set in and set us back. And that ended the second Reconstruction. And then the third Reconstruction, I think, started in Texas, when we started going to these small communities in West Texas and South Texas to try to change the electoral system there. And that's where I got chased out of town. Rock Springs, Texas. It's in the congressional record. I'm not making this up. 82 congressional testimony. It's an exhibit to my testimony where I have the declaration affidavit. And we went to the city of Rock Springs and Texas, which was about 60 miles southwest of Austin. And we would, as part of the MALDIF staff, I had some MALDIF staff, we would go in to look at cemeteries. And I'd give you this context so you didn't think we were sort of weird people, you know, just going visiting cemeteries. We visited cemeteries because we wanted to document the division or the existence of a racially polarized society from birth to death. And we found that there was a segregated cemetery in Rock Springs. And so we went in, we found out who the owner was. There was a private cemetery association. And I went in to talk to the owner, who thought I was going to buy a plot for somebody, and said, no, I'm with all death. And right away, he just started yelling at the top of his lungs. He started saying, you know, you outside agitators, you just come in here and just rile people up and then leave, and so on. And he just started foaming at the mouth, and he literally chased me out of his office. It was like a scene from High Noon. And I now know where the expression redneck comes from. His neck got very red. And we were just yelling at each other, and finally he said, you know, if I see you boys, that you better leave town before sundown. Fortunately, I was not driving the Lancer back then. I had upgraded to a car rental. And so anyway, that's where I got my passion in these cases, and that's where the third Reconstruction, I think, for me personally began. And now we're experiencing a retrogression, a stepping backwards, with the recent decision, the most devastating decision ever in the voting rights arena, with the Shelby County case, which knocked out a key provision of the Voting Rights Act, Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, which the court said that racism in voting was no longer applicable, even though you have patterns of racially polarized voting, et cetera, et cetera. And so it caused a reaction, and that reaction has been, as a result, has manifested itself in what's going on here in California, where a state voting rights act, and it took like 12 years for this to come to fruition. A state voting rights act now forms the foundation for schools and city councils to voluntarily convert from at-large to district elections. And we need more of those. We're starting to work on a similar one with my good friends Denise Hewlett and Barbara Phillips, and my research assistant Molly Matters, who is destined, in my opinion, to be one of the great voting rights attorneys that we're going to have in the Northwest and the Southwest, following, of course, the footsteps of Denise. So I think that once we go to Washington State and we finish and get a state voting rights act there, we're heading off to Colorado. And then from there to Texas. And from Texas, we're going to go to Arizona. So I think we're in the middle of, we're seeing in the midst of another potential reconstruction. And to me, these awards have a transformative effect on me. And this award, for me, is especially meaningful because it reminds me and reinforces in me what my legacy should be. Not titles, although I do let them get to my head sometimes. After I went to Salinas and Assemblyman Luis Alejo presented me a certificate of recognition recognizing me or referring me to as California's voting rights gladiator. As we were getting ready for today's visit, I told Joaquin, "Where's my breastplate?" And then I realized to myself, wait a minute, we're not going into a battle, we're going into a celebration. So I said, "Where's my toga?" So from there, but it's not, the legacy that I want to have is to inspire other law students and other young attorneys to get involved in this fight against voting discrimination. As the Supreme Court in a former era, a long, long time ago, eloquently stated, we need to eliminate the blight of voting discrimination once and for all. And I generally don't quote racists, but excuse me. But there is this quote from Teddy Roosevelt. You see why now I can't go on without him. There is a quote from Teddy Roosevelt that says, "Far better it is to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to take rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy much nor suffer much because they live in the gray twilight that knows not victory nor defeat." That is a very powerful statement, and that's what guided me in my fight on voting rights cases. And that's the spirit of passion that I try to transfer to people like Denise Hewlett, like Nina Perales out of Texas, Jose Garza out of Texas, Rolando Rios out of Texas, Denise Hewlett here in California, and hopefully Molly Matters in Washington State. And so it's not over yet. I mean, Denise has a state voting rights act. The act I was involved attacked at-large elections. Denise was responsible for getting AB 182 passed before the Assembly and the State Senate. And that's going to do the same thing for district elections as what the CVRA did for at-large elections. So the struggle continues, and I want to just finally say that if Donald Trump or Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio, if you're out there listening, especially to Donald Trump, Eva, muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.